Greetings, brothers and sisters. My name is Tim Schrag. I've been the RBC in Region 3 for not quite a year. Since I'm new, I'll take a few minutes to share with you my perception of MDS. I think this will give you context for the Region 3 content which follows as we offer examples of innovation in our region. Kevin used the image of a pivot. That strongly appeals to me as a way of thinking about how MDS functions, staying grounded while actively responding to the changing scene before us is, I think, innovation at its best. Keeping in hand the idea of pivot, I'll add another image that guides me. Think of a large oak tree. A single acorn sends down a taproot. What emerges is a wonderfully complex tree. Did you ever wonder how and why branches come out of the trunk of the oak tree where they do? I have to believe that as the oak tree comes to life, only God can predict where and how the branches, twigs, and leaves of an oak will appear. In Region 3 at our most recent annual meeting, we used this metaphor, summarized in the theme statement, deep roots, new growth. In an oak tree, for example, new growth is constant, but its exact form is unpredictable, never exactly the same. There is a constant, however. New growth cannot be separated from the anchor of deep roots. An oak tree has constant innovation while staying grounded. That's how I think of MDS. We are deeply rooted in a history, an acorn, if you will, going back to the well-known Sunday school picnic in central Kansas in the 1950s. And since then, marvelous growth has happened. Back then, who knew? Who could have imagined? No amount of concentrated, innovative thought or strategic planning could have predicted what MDS is today. Who knew? Answer: no person knew, but God did. I answer this way because my mind goes to the biblical creation story itself. God's Spirit hovered over chaos and formed a living, growing, changing creation, all rooted in the power and love of the Creator himself. But God is not yet finished. This world is still chaotic. Disasters, natural and humanitarian, continue to occur. Yet in the midst of this, God's Spirit is arranging and rearranging and guiding and bringing forth new life. It isn't so much that we are innovating, but rather that God is still creating and we are collaborating as God makes all things new. That for me is the big picture I bring to the tasks of regional leadership. The specifics for Region 3, well, Kevin gave some great Region 3 examples of innovation. Search and rescue in Arkansas, Colorado realizing that for mudslides to not happen, sometimes one has to revegetate before rebuilding. We could call this long-range site preparation, or it's also called creation care. Post-riot cleanup for first-generation small shop owners in Minneapolis, post-Platte River flood, fence repair, church repair in Kansas. I could go on and on. But now I'd like to offer 3 more detailed examples of innovation from Region 3. We'll start with a video from Cleo Cope, the Kansas MDS Unit Chair.
Greetings from the Kansas MDS Unit. I am Cleo Cope, the chairperson for the Kansas Unit. Would you believe that on January 10, the Kansas MDS Unit purchased a cabinet shop? We took a big step of faith. Let me back up and tell you the rest of the story. The Kansas unit has been truly blessed with gifted people in leadership roles. We have also been blessed with significant financial resources. During the past several years, the Kansas MDS unit has explored various ways to use our resources. Along with sending volunteers to various projects, we have financially supported several other MDS projects outside of our state. As we continued how to be responsible with our financial resources, one of our goals, engage more volunteers in the work and ministry of MDS. This past August, I met with Tim Schrag, Region 3 Director, and Jeff Kohler, Binational Regional Operations Coordinator for Region 3. We met to explore and brainstorm about ways to engage more volunteers. I was thinking, could we build partnership home projects? Or what about building tiny houses? Then Tim and Jeff shared an idea, somewhat outside of the box. What about starting a cabinet shop? Building cabinets for binational new builds. I paused for a moment, reflecting on this rather wild idea, and I said, sure, why not explore this? I brought the idea to the Kansas board at our September meeting, received affirmation to do some exploration. I called a friend and fellow church member, Elton Nickel, and asked him to be involved in this project. He said, sure, he'd be willing to help. Immediately, he said, we need to contact Rod Abrams. He owns a cabinet shop in Gossel and would be an excellent resource for us. We scheduled the time to visit with Rod and tour his shop. By the end of the visit, I realized that Rod was thinking about selling his cabinet shop. During the past 4 months, the Kansas MDS board, along with Region 3 and binational leadership, has explored this new opportunity for ministry with Mennonite Disaster Service. On January 10 of this year, the Kansas MDS unit took action to purchase the cabinet shop, Creative Wood, in Gossel, Kansas. We purchased the land, the building, and all of the tools in the shop. We plan to do some modifications to the shop to facilitate more volunteers into the building process. The Kansas MDS unit is excited about this new area of engaging more volunteers for Mennonite Disaster Service.
Isn't that a marvelous pivot? The foot on the ground piece of this Kansas unit initiative is that MDS builds houses after disasters. New builds need cabinets. The Kansas unit pivoted and looked around. They saw abundance in their treasury. They took note of the availability of willing local Kansas volunteers who can build cabinets. The Kansas unit also saw that cabinet building isn't something one can take to a new build job site. So, innovation, pivot. Rather than traveling to the job, bring the job to the workers, then ship the completed cabinets to the disaster job sites when needed. In this innovative way, the Kansas unit will be helping build new houses for Florida, Texas, Kentucky, and other places, and they will be doing so at an MDS cabinet shop in Gossel, Kansas. A second example of innovation in Region 3. The Mennonite congregation in San Antonio, grounded in God's love, noticed that legal asylum seekers tend to stop for a time in San Antonio as they flee the humanitarian crisis on the border. They need shelter. The foot on the ground, the deep root for MDS is that we build shelters for those suffering from disasters. Some fascinating pivots occurred. Resources from the MDS network needed to come together in a particular way. This MDS initiative took on a unique shape. A Mennonite youth group from Region 2 in Indiana traveled 800 miles to Camp Menasca, a Mennonite church camp in Kansas, for a week-long service project. There, those high school volunteers built the walls for tiny houses for the San Antonio Mennonite Church Shelter Ministry. An MDS volunteer from Nebraska transported the walls 675 miles to San Antonio. A group of MDS volunteers from Seminole, Texas, came 400 miles to San Antonio to assemble those tiny house components. The bottom line, on the one hand, it's a deep-rooted story of shelter for those suffering consequences of disaster. The new growth, the innovation, the particulars of this project were unique and they were innovative. If you like metaphors, you could say that another, perhaps surprising branch emerged on the magnificent oak tree, which is the history of MDS. Two examples of innovation: a cabinet shop, tiny houses. Finally, the Prayer Stream Ministry based in Colorado. By way of background and introduction, we need to remind ourselves of a basic tenet, almost a taproot of MDS. Traditionally and rightly, MDS emphasizes relationships. Any project director worth his or her salt will orient volunteers by saying, remember, put down your tools and talk to the homeowner. Take time to relate is a decades-old deep truth which guides us. We in MDS care as much about the inner spirit of victims as we do about their outward circumstances. So it was perhaps not so far outside of the box when several Colorado MDS volunteers took an old, tired, aluminum Airstream travel trailer, and they renovated it for use as a kind of mobile prayer chapel they now call the Prayer Stream Ministry. The Prayer Stream has become a periodic component of MDS responses in Colorado. What I would share with you is how this worked most recently in the Colorado wildfires, which occurred several weeks ago. There, on the one hand, the Prayer Stream Ministry team collaborated with local education officials to be a resource for traumatized elementary school children of families whose homes were lost to fire. But maybe more interestingly, the Prayer Stream story came to include another group in Colorado impacted by those fires. These were disaster agencies' representatives other than MDS. Put simply, that old remodeled Airstream trailer became a haven for exhausted responders from a variety of agencies, not just MDS. Jeff Collar was there. He heard their stories firsthand. They were burned out at the end of their ropes, emotionally and spiritually depleted. Some were near tears. And for some, in that old travel trailer transformed into a mobile chapel, there were holy moments. There, these disaster workers could experience in person the invitation of Jesus. Come to me, all ye who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest for your souls. Put down your tools and listen. We've done this for decades, but now the new growth has again taken a new form, still connected to the same deep roots. It's just a different expression of what MDS has always done. We care for the person in a deep way, which reflects God's love and care for every person. A cabinet shop, tiny houses, a Prayer Stream chapel. This concludes what is at one level the Region 3 report. But I would also affirm that similar and yet unique stories like these abound not just in Region 3. Faithful innovation is in our history, it is in our DNA, because we are a living and growing organism, a part of God's good creation. The belief that we are all collaborators, servants, co-workers in the work of the kingdom of God to which we are called is a belief which has sustained us from the beginning. And so I don't fear innovation, I expect it, I welcome it, because I believe that we all trust God to reveal to us the particulars of the path ahead. Thank you.